An update in the courtroom this morning. The man accused of stalking Caitlin Clark, we've learned, will spend the next year and a half in prison.
55-year-old Michael Lewis pleaded guilty to stalking and harassment charges, but not before being scolded by the judge.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a serious and unsettling story that has been making national headlines, involving one of the biggest stars in women's basketball, Caitlin Clark. If you're a fan of the WNBA or college basketball, you've almost certainly heard of Caitlin Clark, the Indiana Fever standout player and college basketball's all-time leading scorer. But what you might not know is a disturbing case of a man who was just sentenced for relentlessly stalking and harassing her. This is a story about fame, privacy, personal safety, and the darker side of public attention. So, let's break it all down. On Monday, a Texas man named Michael Lewis was sentenced to more than 2 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to stalking and harassing Caitlin Clark. The case has raised many difficult questions about athlete security, the impact of social media on harassment, and how the justice system addresses these alarming situations. We're going to carefully walk through the details of what happened, who Michael Lewis is, what exactly he did, and what this could mean for Caitlin Clark and other high-profile public figures. Stick with me until the end, because this is a story that's both troubling, eye-opening, and extremely important. First, let's talk a little about Caitlin Clark for those who may not fully know her remarkable journey.
It's by the Sparks fans. 6 on the shot clock. Clark, a deep three. Oop, that is. She missed her first 7.
Caitlin Clark is nothing short of a phenomenon in women's basketball. She was the #1 overall pick in last year's WNBA draft by the Indiana Fever, and for very good reason. Clark is college basketball's all-time leading scorer, a record that speaks volumes about her unmatched talent, dedication, and relentless work ethic. Whether it's her signature long-range shooting, her brilliant playmaking, or her ability to rise under extreme pressure, Clark has quickly become a household name, not just in the WNBA, but across the sports world as a whole. She's young, incredibly talented, and clearly has a bright future ahead. But with that kind of fame always comes a downside, and this is where the story takes a darker turn. Enter Michael Lewis, a 55-year-old man from Texas who, according to prosecutors, became disturbingly fixated on Clark. Court records reveal that Lewis was accused of sending a series of vulgar and sexually graphic messages to her on X, the social media platform, during December and January. These weren't just random comments or overzealous fan notes. Prosecutors described them as threatening, deeply disturbing, and highly inappropriate. The kind of messages that would make anyone feel unsafe, especially someone in the public eye like Clark. Now, let's pause for a moment to consider what this must have been like for Caitlin Clark. Imagine being only 23 years old, fresh off an extraordinary college career, beginning your very first season in the WNBA, and already deal with the enormous pressures of being a national star athlete. You're trying to focus on your team, your performance, and your future. But suddenly you start receiving messages like these. It's not just uncomfortable, it's terrifying. And for Clark, who is already under an intense spotlight as one of the biggest names in modern sports, this harassment added a completely new layer of stress, distraction, and fear. So what exactly did Michael Lewis do? According to the Marion County, Indiana prosecutor's office, Lewis repeatedly sent these inappropriate and threatening messages over a period of time, targeting Clark in a way that clearly warranted serious legal action. The specifics of the messages haven't been fully released to the public, and honestly, they don't need to be. The fact that they were described as vulgar and sexually graphic tells us enough. This wasn't just a case of a fan being too enthusiastic. This was stalking and harassment. Plain and simple. Lewis was arrested in January and has remained in an Indianapolis jail ever since. On Monday, he finally faced the consequences of his actions. He pleaded guilty to the charges of stalking and harassment, and the court sentenced him to 2.5 years in prison for the stalking charge. He also received a 180-day suspended sentence for harassment, meaning he won't serve that portion unless he violates the terms of his release later on. Since Lewis has already been in custody since January, he will receive 197 days of credit toward his prison term, leaving him to serve just over 2 years in the Indiana Department of Correction. But here's where the story becomes even more frustrating. During his pre-sentencing statement on Monday, Lewis attempted to defend himself in a way that raised eyebrows across the courtroom. According to NBC affiliate WHR in Indianapolis, Lewis denied that he had ever threatened Clark. Instead, he bizarrely claimed he was only trying to highlight potential security concerns for her. He even went so far as to say, "I want her to be safe." Now, if you're shaking your head, you're not alone. It's hard to imagine how sending vulgar, sexually graphic, and threatening messages could ever be framed as an act of protection. The judge clearly wasn't buying it, either. At one point, the judge interrupted Lewis and warned him that he was in danger of talking himself out of his plea agreement. The judge reminded him firmly, "You have to understand that as part of a plea deal, you are admitting responsibility." In other words, Lewis was trying to downplay his actions, but the court wasn't having it. This moment in the courtroom highlights the complexity of cases like these. People who engage in stalking or harassment often attempt to justify or minimize their behavior, claiming it harmless or even well-intentioned. But the truth is, actions like this can leave a lasting and damaging impact on victims. For Caitlin Clark, these messages weren't just words typed on a screen. They were a genuine source of fear, anxiety, and disruption. Marion County Prosecutor Ryan Mears summarized it best in his official statement. This resolution ensures that the defendant is held accountable for his threatening actions, the fear he instilled, and the disruption he caused. Mears also noted that the sentence allows Clark to move forward with peace of mind, focusing on her career and the things that matter most. And that's the key takeaway. Caitlin Clark deserves the right to live her life and pursue her career without fear or harassment. As part of the sentencing, the court also issued a strict stay-away order prohibiting Lewis from attending Indiana Fever games or going anywhere near Hinkle Fieldhouse, where Clark's boyfriend works as an assistant basketball coach for Butler University. This is an important detail because it shows how stalking cases often extend beyond just the primary individual being targeted, impacting their loved ones and their professional circles as well. The stay-away order is designed to protect not only Caitlin Clark, but also the people closest to her, ensuring that Michael Lewis cannot approach her or her loved ones in any capacity. Now, let's take a step back and talk about why this case matters on a larger scale, beyond just Caitlin Clark herself. Stalking and harassment are serious, widespread issues, especially for public figures such as athletes, actors, or musicians. When you live in the spotlight, you're expected to handle a certain level of attention, but there's always a line between healthy fandom and unhealthy obsession. Unfortunately, that line gets crossed far too often. Social media platforms like X make it easier than ever for fans to connect with celebrities, but they also create opportunities for harassment to spread more easily and more directly. A 2021 study from the Pew Research Center revealed that 41% of Americans have experienced some form of online harassment, and for public figures, that number is almost certainly much higher. Women, in particular, are disproportionately targeted with sexually explicit or threatening messages. Clark's situation is a stark reminder of just how dangerous and damaging that harassment can become. This case also raises critical questions about how we protect athletes and other public figures. The WNBA has been steadily growing in popularity, and players like Caitlin Clark are helping elevate the league to exciting new heights. But with increased visibility comes an increased level of risk. Teams and leagues must have strong systems in place to identify, monitor, and respond to threats, whether they come from social media, in-person encounters, or other channels. For Clark, who is still very early in her professional career, this experience could have lasting effects both emotionally and professionally. It's an important reminder that fame isn't just about endorsement deals, highlight reels, or record-breaking performances. It can also mean dealing with unwanted and sometimes dangerous attention that disrupts both personal life and career focus. Another key angle to consider is the role of the legal system in these cases. The fact that Michael Lewis was arrested, charged, and sentenced relatively quickly shows that the authorities in Marion County took this matter extremely seriously. Prosecutor Ryan Mears and his team made it clear that they were not going to let this behavior slide unchecked. But it's also important to note that not every stalking or harassment case gets this kind of timely resolution. Many victims, especially those who aren't high profile, often struggle to have their complaints taken seriously by law enforcement. This case could serve